IVM.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hi, I'm Sarthak and I welcome you to All Things Policy. In the interim budget 2024-25, there was an announcement by the Union Finance Minister for formation of a high-powered committee. The exact lines are like this. The government will form a high-powered committee for an extensive consideration of the challenges arising from fast population growth and demographic changes. The committee will be mandated to make recommendations for addressing these challenges comprehensively in relation to the goal of Viksit Bharat. In this episode, we will discuss if India has fast population growth, are the demographic changes significant, and in fact, is there such a need for formation of a committee like this? Right, and keep in mind this committee is supposed to make recommendations to address the challenges. So the challenges should exist. Accordingly, there should be recommendations, right? So joining me in this episode is my colleague Suman. Hi, Suman. Welcome to All Things Policy.
Hi, Sarthak. Well, thank you. Happy to be here again.
Yeah. So, in fact, even before discussing about the intended objectives of formation of this committee, I was thinking about some broader things, right? For instance, what is usually the intended objective of governments that try to shape population trajectories, right? It's not that India is the only country which has done that, right? India has had these kind of policies since 1952, but there have been other countries also. Like for instance, China has done it. They have had one child policy for a long time, and then over a period of time they have revised it. That's a different thing. But countries world over, they have at some point of time tried to shape population growth trajectories, right? What is usually the rationale for all these things? What is the intended objective?
I think it comes from basic economic philosophy, right? Scarce resources, and that has to be distributed over larger number of people, and therefore the competition. And therefore, if you can, because you can't control resources, if you can control the number of people dependent on that, then I think the at least thinking earlier was that then we will be able to do a better job of allocating resources. Then also those other issues about how do we plan for the future, or how do we plan for human development, health, education, etc. Because if there are too many people dependent on these things, then it becomes difficult. So that was the earlier thinking. Also, it comes from Malthusian theory, maybe, of population growth, and population growth is always geometric, and whereas growth in resources is not so much so, and therefore it may be good. I mean, the implication was that it may be good that if we have fewer people. That was the original thought, but I think we've come a long way from there, right? From that way of thinking about people and what they can do for the country itself.
Yeah. So when you mentioned scarce resources, right? So another thing came to my mind right now. So so again, resources can be material resources. So again, the traditional thinking was, the material resources will be limited, and we might have too many people for these resources, right? And that is why you want to restrict the population growth rates, maybe. But another way to look at resources, human resources, right? There is also a possibility that you might not have enough human resources in your countries, and that is also the reason why you want to shape population trajectories. In fact, some of the countries in recent times have been trying to do that. They have been trying to provide incentives so that the population growth rate increases, right? So for instance, China used to have one child policy, but they have eased it. You can have more, you can have two children, and now I think they changed it to three children. Some other countries have been trying to provide incentives They provide monthly childcare allowances. Some provide grants, right? So if couples decide to go for a child, so again, it's you are trying to manage resources. It can be material resources, it can be human resources, but at the base, or the fundamental thing here is the idea that some sort of centralized planning you need to do
Or control over.
to control your resources. It can be human resources, it can be material resources.
Yeah, actually, I mean, there are, like you said, the governments have been doing various things. If we go into what are these things that, what governments have been doing, etc., we can look at it from different frameworks, I guess, right? So
Yeah.
one thing that we always at Takshashila we look at is the things governments do framework, right? So we're plotting state capacity required on one side, and we are looking at extent of intervention. So I think governments use the whole spectrum of of instruments that they have. The ones that are lesser, I mean, that need lesser intervention and lesser state capacity, take a longer time, but they will, they will yield results, or they will, show something much later. But if we want immediate results, then you need more coercion, you need more state capacity to get that. So I think we've seen governments doing all of this, and it's just like for analysis for us as to how it has panned out through the years, through the decades over here.
Yeah, if I can add some examples here, right? I would say engaging in rhetoric to be something like saying "hum do hamare do." All these
Yeah.
things will be plastered everywhere. So again, you are engaging in rhetoric, but you're not, or it might also be to some extent nudging, right? Somewhere
Yeah.
nudging elsewhere, because you are trying to change the mindset of people. These kind of campaigns, but at the same time, we have had incentives as well in case of India. Uh, and yeah, as you correctly mentioned, there have been coercive measures, especially during the time of emergency. There were different kinds of instances of forced sterilization. By the way, this is not something which has happened only in the Indian context. There are other places. For instance, there have been instances of forced sterilization in China and other places as well. Yeah, so you're correct when you say that all sort of measures have been used by governments world over.
Yeah, I think that stems from the fact that more population is a problem. We have to control more population and all of that, right? I just like
Yeah.
to, point our. I'm sure most of our readers would have read this book, but it's a beautiful fiction book. It's written by Rohinton Mistry, and it's called A Fine Balance. It actually documents the life of four citizens in the emergency and how they get forced into sterilization and why these things affect that class of people more. So when we're talking about coercion and all of that, it's just a diversion from this conversation, but I thought I'll just bring that up here, right?
Yeah. So thanks, Suman, for pointing out that various methods have been used by governments world over to shape population trajectories. But the important part here is, like, whenever we look at any policy, we should look at the intended outcome, but at the same time, we should also keep in mind what are some of the unintended outcomes. So, what do you think are some of the unintended consequences of governments trying to control the size of the population? And again, what are some of the unintended consequences of specific policies used by the government here? As you just mentioned, right, there are various policies that have been used.
Yeah. So I think, firstly, at the heart of it, it is a very personal issue, and therefore the extent of intrusion, intervention into a citizen's personal life is really high when you talk about any of these programs that governments run. So as it is, you begin on a wrong foot. So if you're using coercion in these kind of areas, then it becomes also more difficult for you to get a buy-in from people. And the extent of coercion itself makes people move away from the intended outcome, or whatever you intend for that policy to do for you. again, then we're talking about state capacity required for that level of intervention. So you require a lot of people on the ground to, I mean, if you're talking about forced sterilization, etc., you're talking about people on the ground to do this. You're talking about health professionals. You're talking about, a lot of this infrastructure that all countries, especially countries at our development levels, may not have. Right? Those are two things. You can also think about misaligned incentives, right? So if people who are conducting this whatever this drive, this sterilization or population control drive, have been given some kind of targets or
Targets.
anything, yeah. So if they can just go and sterilize people who are not even in that particular age group or the intended category itself. So you could go wrong in every which way. Are there other things that you can think of, Sarthak?
Yeah, so I mean, this something that comes to my mind is how the one child policy in China, right? It impacted the society in the sense that the society was patriarchal, and you have now a one child policy. So there was a preference for male child, as a result of which, again, the gender ratio became skewed in many parts, and and this is something which gets reflected now, right? There are men who are, I mean, who are not be able to find partners. So these kind of things can also happen, right? uh,
Yeah.
you're imposing something, but the society has some biases, and it gets even it gets reflected in these ways.
And also something like population control, it's not a switch that you can turn on and turn off at any point. Right? Okay, today
Yeah,
we want to control the population, let's do this, and tomorrow it'll be okay. They all have consequences over a period of time, and all of it comes to bite
yeah,
us or to affect us 2 decades. So these things have to be kept in. I mean, you have to really think through these things before you decide on extent of intervention in all these kind of policies, right?
yeah. Since you mentioned about, you provided this analogy of switch, right, on off. Now, the one thing that comes to my mind here is, typically, right, if you look at the numbers among the people among the lower income sections, the fertility rates tend to be high as compared to the fertility rates among people in the comparatively higher income categories, right? So the point here is, I mean, we can look at it from the lens of opportunity cost for people who are in the lower economic sections, right? The value of their time might be comparatively low, and consequently, they might be fine spending more time on raising kids as compared to people who are in the higher income categories. They would possibly give, or they would ascribe more value to their time, and they would possibly want to limit the number of kids, because the opportunity cost for them, if they're having multiple kids, is way more. So indirectly, what I'm trying to say here is, if you have economic development, if the incomes of people increases, the chances of people going for more number of kids goes down, and this is something which will not happen overnight. It will not be like turning on the switch or turning off the switch. It is something which is gradual, uh, like a like
Regular.
switching on, yeah, like a regulator, right? Rightly pointed out. So in fact, there are commentators who will say economic development acts as the best contraceptive, right? It's not the government control measures, planned measures. Rather, it's economic development that plays a much more significant role here.
Yeah.
And yeah, it
Also,
will not
there's
happen overnight.
yeah, also there's a joke that goes around that school fees are the biggest, uh, you know.
Okay. Oh yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, I want to add to this, right? Not I'm not talking about the school fees thing, but see, all these policies are, I mean, especially when the governments are trying to restrict the growth of the population, it just assumes one thing. It assumes that uh, people only consume, right? They are the ones who will go and consume different kinds of material resources, and as a result of which, the economy will fall short of resources. It doesn't assume, or it doesn't consider the fact that people also produce, right? they
Contribute.
participate in different kinds of economic activity. They produce different kinds of goods,
Goods and
services. They contribute to ideas. Right? It is
yeah,
just an assumption that each and every individual is just consuming and they are not adding to the economy, which again is wrong.
true. Yes. Yeah, but for people to add to the economy, for people to contribute to the economy, the quality of your workforce or the quality of your, um, human resources are important. I think that's where we'll be going through to the
Yeah, yeah,
next part, right?
yeah. But I think before that, we should take a quick break and we can discuss this after the break.
Stay tuned to All Things Policy. We'll be right back after a short commercial break.
We've discussed some important or interesting frameworks. If these frameworks interest you and if you'd like to learn more about this, you could check out our courses on school.takshashila.org.in. You could also look at our open platform for all things public policy, opentakshashila.net. We have a forum for discussion, we have events, we have open courses out there. So do check these out, and I'm sure you'll find them interesting, engaging.
Hello, welcome from the break. So before the break, we were talking about the dynamics between the government and population, how governments from time to time have tried to shape the population growth trajectory. Just to reiterate, in the interim budget, the Union Finance Minister announced the formation of a committee to study population growth. So, what is the need for such a committee? The Union Finance Minister mentioned that this particular committee is going to analyze, understand the challenges that arise from fast population growth and demographic changes, and it is going to make recommendations to address these changes. So, Suman, what do you think? Is there a need for such a committee? Does it make sense?
Firstly, like we discussed in the earlier part, uh, does the government see population growth as a challenge, first of all? If you do, then, why is it a challenge is something that we need to rethink. Okay. In my opinion, though, firstly, if we want data, I think there is a case for, having this committee after we have data on what is the population trajectory, how is it looking, who are in what kind of age groups, all of that. For if we have that kind of data, then maybe we can make some decisions based on, relating to, how do we get the most out of people here. But at this point, we don't have any data on, we have very little data on this.
But Suman, we have some data, right? National Family Health Survey.
Yeah, we have fertility rates, we have that kind of thing, but we don't have a population-wide census that we had to do. We have not yet done. So I'm sure these are good enough for decision making, but it would make better sense if we had the census first and then worked on that. That is, of course, one thing. But yeah, to even just discuss that, we have data saying that total fertility rate is decreasing. So then if it is already decreasing, what is the need for us to, if the worry is growing population, then we are in the right trajectory. If fertility rate is decreasing, then we might not need to take any drastic measures. We should allow it to go.
Yeah, so in fact, adding to that, the fertility rates have not just declined, right? For most of the states in India, they're below the replacement levels, right? And if you look at the country average, that is also below replacement level. Only few states, I think Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, and Meghalaya, right? They have a fertility rate which is higher than the replacement level. So again, the fertility rates are not necessarily a cause of concern if you look at these numbers.
True.
And also the population growth rate, right? Every decade you have these numbers, right, between census, right? It had also been declining till 2011 census, right? After that we haven't had the census data, so we can't say. But till 2011, from 1980s onwards, right, there has been a consistent decline. And it is not just decline for a particular community or a particular region, right? It has declined for like most of the communities and most of the places. So again, the fear of fast population growth might not be correct or true.
Yeah, and also the much reviled or the popular trope that goes around that certain communities have higher and certain communities, that has also been disproved by a lot of data coming out from the government. You have to look at this total fertility rate region wise, like
If you're looking at the fertility rate of Muslims in Uttar Pradesh, you should compare it with fertility rate of Hindus in Uttar Pradesh. So again, in that region, compare it among the communities.
Yeah, or you can say that fertility of the Muslims in Kerala is much lesser than Hindus in Uttar Pradesh. So it doesn't make sense to make a community wise discussion. I mean, much too much discussion on that, but make more broad-based inferences and do what is needed for that kind of a population, for that kind of groups is what I think is more relevant at this point, right?
And also, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was thinking about, when we're talking of changes in demography, the one thing that should worry us actually is because we are already at replacement rate or aging population should worry us, because if we are talking about Viksit Bharat 2047, etc., the proportion of aging population will be almost similar to working population. I mean, there is some kind of studies that have been done on those kind of that kind of numbers. So that should actually be our focus in terms of seeing what can we do to skill people to be ready for 2047, and what can we do for people who will be aging at 2047 onwards, because we are talking about Viksit Bharat, etc. That was where I was
So
going.
this term Viksit Bharat refers to around 2047, right?
Yeah, it's a long, yeah,
long time. But yeah, anyway, we should be again not a very long trajectory, but still. But when the term this particular term Viksit Bharat, right? I mean, is there any definition of this, or is there any specific meaning ascribed to this notion of Viksit Bharat? What kind of numbers we need for Viksit Bharat, or what kind of numbers we should achieve by Viksit Bharat? Is there any projection as such?
And also, do we once we have reached that, is it done? Are we done with being Viksit Bharat? Is there something else beyond that? That is also something that we need to talk about when we talk about these kind of slogans or these kind of terms that we use.
Yeah. Now, but let's say we have a population growth committee or a committee to understand population growth trajectories. Let's say we have it, right? Let's say let's consider it as given. So in that case, what all should be the priority of this committee, right? What it should keep in mind?
Yeah, like I was saying, I think first of all, get data on what is the number in each category of population. What is your working age population? Therefore, what will be your working age population, and therefore what you should do to get them ready for skills or for them to contribute, like we were talking about, just not consume but produce and contribute. How can we make them more productive? How can we make them more useful? That is one part of it. And like I was saying, aging population, therefore what can we do to help with health, like preventive care right now? I mean, if we are looking at aging population at 2047, I think a lot of our focus has to be on preventive health, like, and then look at probably pension, working age, retirement age, all of those things, elderly care, all of that will have huge ramifications on society itself. So those are some things, at least, that come to mind for me when we are when I think about this population, if at all, if we need this commission.
Yeah. So, Suman, a few observations here, right? So, one thing that you mentioned is you'll have a large proportion of people who are in the old age category, right? And there is a possibility that people in the old age category might not be doing well physically or maybe mentally also, and there will be a dependence on the younger population, right? So that is a possibility, but there is also a chance that people become healthier over time, right? So maybe someone is 70-year-old or 80-year-old, there is a possibility that this person is again in the workforce, is physically and mentally fit to be in the workforce, is not necessarily uh, dependent on the younger population. There is a possibility of that. uh, Again, we're looking at that longer time horizon, right? You
Yeah,
don't know,
yeah,
maybe there will be massive improvements in healthcare, and already there are so many research happening on anti-aging and all. uh, so again, depends, right? But for this also, we need to ensure that we create
okay.
enough
Back then.
opportunity so that yeah, you can absorb these people into the workforce. And right now, that is a massive problem, right? Ideally we should be creating somewhere around what 20 million jobs a year, but we are not able to do that. So ensuring the elderly, at least the old age category people, um, remain employed might be a challenge.
Yeah. And then,
Secondly, yeah, go ahead.
go on. No, no, finish what you're saying.
And another aspect, there is this possibility that the elderly might not I mean, they might not be contributing much to the economy because again, they're not earning, they're not spending. But that might not also be true, because if people are well off, people are fine physically, mentally, they might continue to consume, right? In that case, your tax revenues need not necessarily see a massive dip. So again, nations economy might not be impacted that much, right? These are some studies to point to that as well, that in some of these aging Southeast Asian economies, uh, this is some projections say that it will not be as bad. But yeah, we have to ensure that we create we continue to create economic opportunities. If we don't do that, then it is going to be an issue.
Yeah, and I think we should not miss the gender part of this whole puzzle. That as you see fertility rates decrease, you will also see women have more time towards contributing, right? Should have more. I mean, as fertility rates decrease, because traditionally child rearing was a woman's job. Now that we have moved, I mean, if she has fewer children, she should have more time to contribute to society. So if that is true, then how are we going to utilize this the women in society? That is one thing we must think about. It should not be that okay, now that women have more time, we should not say
They're
that okay,
more
it's now.
domestic.
No, and it should not become, oh, we have more women now who have time on their hands. At the same time, we have aging population. So
Yeah.
maybe elderly care becomes the response. As it is already mostly thing. But we must look at how well we can ensure that women participate in the economy. So again, there we're talking about maybe creches or whatever childcare facilities, maybe women friendly.
Transportation, public
Yeah,
transport facilities.
public transport, just safety, women's safety, and all of that. Those issues, I mean, those are basics that we need to do irrespective. But if we have to get these women to participate, we have to look at that also through through this committee or commission or whatever we want to set up.
Yeah. Another aspect, so as we were just discussing about the fertility rates, right? In the southern states, the fertility rates are way lower, and in some of the northern states, which also happen to be the populous states, there the fertility rates tend to be high.
Yeah.
So in future, what will happen is the the proportion of elderly in the southern states will be more, while the proportion of people in the younger age category, working age category, will be more in the northern states. So
Mhm.
again, you can look at it from different lens. One lens is yes, southern states will not have enough people who can contribute to the economy in terms of labor, and some of these northern states, UP, Bihar, uh, will have a lot of young people who might not be able, and these states might not be able to accommodate them into the economy, right? They might not provide them employment opportunities. So there can be issues. Another way
Yes.
to look at it is people from the northern states can migrate to the southern states, and yeah, it's kind of a win-win situation. But for all these things to happen, we have to ensure that movement from one state to another is seamless. Like, as per the constitution in India, you can move from one place to another. You can practice, profess, whatever. You can do anything. Or there are some reasonable restrictions, but you can by and large move. But usually that's not the case. There are different kinds of barriers. There can be legal barriers. Different states have reservations for locals, and also there are social barriers, language, and all those things. So we also need to take all these things into consideration. What can be done to facilitate this movement so that we don't fall into that zero-sum game trap.
True. Yeah. And also adding to the mix will come the tax devolution and all of that. I don't think we have time to discuss that at this point, at least in this podcast, right?
Yeah. I mean, the way resources are devolved, it needs to take into consideration these factors as well. And by and large, the Finance Commission does that. Yeah.
I would say that first get the census out of the way. Please get the census done, then do anything else. If at all, I mean, you already have data on fertility rates, you already have data on migration or aging population, what will it be, etc. So, I mean, if at all we need this committee, it needs to focus on how to get the population better involved or contributing, and not so much at negative things like restricting people's movements or any other more coercive tactics that we have seen in the past.
I think, Suman, this is the right way to conclude this episode. A Viksit Bharat should be one where you have less coercion, more freedom.
Sure. Yeah, I couldn't disagree there at all. Thank you, Sarthak.
Yeah, thanks, Suman. Thanks to the audience for tuning in.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.